Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips, which is brought to you by Wellness Forum Health, the Wellness Forum Institute, and Make Americans Free Again. We're taking applications right now to start a Food Over Medicine Club or a Make Americans Free Again tribe, or both. We're building an informed society, and health and medicine and legal are part of that. And between the two organizations, Wellness Forum and Make Americans Free Again, we're doing a great job of taking care of those things. So if you want information, send me an email at pampopper@wellnessforum.com. Our membership drive continues. Join, rejoin, or upgrade, and we will give you a certificate equal to the dues that you invest, which you might decide to invest in our upcoming Food Over Medicine retreat, May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So the Friday, Saturday portion of it, great education, which includes topics I know you're interested in, the great protein debate, how much is enough, how much is too much, supplements, omega-3, magnesium, vitamin C, cooking classes, menu plans. In fact, I'm really working on doing a cooking class here at my house. Most of you have never seen me do a cooking class, and I never thought I would have fun doing these, but I do. So that'll be a first for you. So in addition to that, some topics you've been asking about, like irritable bowel, gluten, glyphosate, inflammation, and more. On Sunday night, once we finish the Friday and Saturday night, Friday all day, Saturday, and Saturday night session, which we're recording in case you can't join live. On Sunday, we're going to have a put it all into action planning session. So you're going to walk away from this with a plan, what you're going to do about the information that you learned. And so, and we'll record that too, so that if you can't join us on Sunday night, you'll still be able to go through the worksheets and complete the plan. All right. So I have a couple of news items and updates for you. And the first thing is I'll just start by saying I have to admit it's super fun to be right, particularly about things like the origins of COVID and the rest of the COVID debacle. And it's even more fun when, as time goes on, the accuracy of the statements that I made in March 2020 and which Matha made in court beginning the summer of 2020 are supported by more and more evidence. Just this week, a report that the Biden administration was required to release but didn't became public. I understand why after reading it. The title of the report is the Report to the Committees on Armed Services of the Senate and House of Representatives 2019 World Military Games. According to the report, 7 U.S. military service members developed COVID-19-like symptoms during or right after their participation in the World Military Games in Wuhan in October 2019. The Biden administration had claimed in 2021 that there was no evidence that this came from the Wuhan lab or that China had anything to do with it. And of course, we had already started filing lawsuits and that sort of thing, but we always had the administration claiming we were wrong. That's not going on anymore, thankfully, right? This revelation adds to a growing mountain of evidence showing that the virus originated at the Wuhan lab and that it was circulating in Wuhan long before the Chinese government told the world about it. In fact, the Chinese government covered it up. The location of the games was close to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where Chinese scientists with funding from the US government approved by Anthony Fauci were collaborating with Americans like Peter Daszak and Ralph Baric to create viruses, including SARS-CoV-2. The American military athletes traveled to and from Wuhan from the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and Washington State was one of the first states to report COVID-19 cases in early 2020. Military athletes from Germany, France, Italy, and Luxembourg who competed in the October 2019 games also reported coming down with symptoms that sounded like COVID-19 during their stay in Wuhan. And what was very interesting is they described Wuhan as a ghost town. Now, this is, I believe, a city of like 8 million people. So when there's nobody on the streets, that was probably pretty eerie and bizarre in the eyes of visitors, right? This is consistent with a House Foreign Affairs report from 2019 that concluded that the World Military Games, quote, was one of the earliest super spreader of events. The report stated that the lab leak likely took place before September 2019, and also concluded that the sequence used to make SARS-CoV-2 was likely collected from a cave in Yunnan province between 2012 and 2015. And of course, we have all sorts of data about how Peter Daszak was petitioning the government through grant proposals to finance taking bat viruses and inserting foreign cleavage sites and things of that nature. So where we are right now, it's a pretty sweet place to be in our position. The CIA, the FBI, the Energy Department, Congress, and an army of scientists like Richard E. Bright, Stephen Quay, former CDC Director Robert Redfield, have concluded that SARS-CoV-2 came from the Wuhan Institute, and it was a result of gain-of-function research. As I mentioned, it's great to be vindicated after the horrible things that were said, the death threats and other awful stuff that happened back then. But the most important thing is that the evidence is really piling up on our side in the court cases against EcoHealth and the people who collaborated with the Wuhan lab and the scientists there. By the way, one of the things that makes this so egregious, and I think it's important to point out, is that according to the FBI, just as of last year, the Chinese Communist Party was the leading enemy and threat to the United States of America. So the wanton disregard for public safety of Americans and the rest of the world that it took to do this is just beyond the pale. I have said once in a while, I've mentioned, maybe they should be tried for treason in addition to the damages from making this virus. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, so I probably shouldn't hypothesize about it, but it just seems to me that what they did was super egregious, much more than had they done something like this in Canada, for example. So anyway, it gets better every week for us actually at this point in time. It helps a lot. And as I've mentioned, watching the paint dry pays off because the stuff is coming out, fast and furious now, but not so much when we first started, right? Now, speaking of cases, I've been reporting to you monthly revenue and expenditures. In March, our donations were $27,539. And our expenses were $43,304. So this can't go on forever, right? And we have a lot of expensive cases coming up. So we're taking the Creighton University case to the Nebraska Supreme Court, the Harrington case in Maine, the boy vaccinated without parental consent is going to the United States Supreme Court. We rarely have a week go by anymore where we don't have a hearing in the EcoHealth cases, and just to park in New York is $70 to give you an idea of expenses, just out-of-pocket stuff. We already have a case in front of the United States Supreme Court. That's the Paul Thomas case. I could go on, but you get the idea. Dozens and dozens and dozens of these cases representing people who were fired from their jobs, lost their medical licenses, students who were kicked out of school, students who were injured because they got the jab because they were afraid of being kicked out of school, and students whose records were damaged by refusal to get the jab, and now they can't even go to another school. I mean, it just goes on and on. We represent firefighters fired by the city of New York for not getting the jab, while the COVID czar was having sex parties with his friends and admitted that the vaccines made no difference to an undercover reporter. And we're going after the former COVID czar too. So, and of course, we remain the only group that's pursuing the EcoHealth et al. People. So I know all of you, if you're watching this, you want to see these cases and others go the distance, but we need money. So the last time I asked for extra money was like last fall. Everybody rallied. I mean, every day the mail was celebration in our office as the money came in. I know you guys can do it and you care. So thank you in advance for your support. I super appreciate it. And so do the attorneys. We have the hardest working, most talented attorneys in the country working for the least amount of money we can possibly pay them because they're so committed to this, right? All right, so the second news item I wanted to cover concerns the measles outbreak, because this continues to come up in our meetings here, and I get emails from people, and it comes up in phone calls that come to our office, like, what the heck is going on with all this attention to the measles? And as I mentioned in a previous video, this is mainly political. Measles cases are reported every year in the United States. And they tend to be in clusters, such as in Mennonite communities that might be less likely to vaccinate their children. But whether or not there's media attention and hysteria about children with measles, we save that for times when it appears that people are becoming more skeptical about vaccines, or in this case, when new public health officials threaten to actually look into the safety of vaccines. God forbid, you should never look into it, right? I'm reminded of that exchange with Jimmy Dore when he was talking about investigating, looking into things, and people would say, "What's the matter with you? Listen to the experts." And he says, if I go, and just think about it, if you were going shopping for a car and you said you were going to look into it, and somebody says, "What's the matter with you? You think you're Henry Ford? Just do what the salesman tells you to do." So they just don't tolerate people investigating and looking into things on their own, which should speak volumes, right? What are you afraid people will discover if we start to look into it? Well, some of the more recent information reinforces the idea that it's all political. And I'll tell you, you probably never heard about this, but in Ontario, Canada, there have been 572 reported cases of measles, significantly more than Texas. You heard nothing about it, right? There's also been no attention paid to the fact, and I think this is huge, that Ontario's chief medical officer recently, during the outbreak in Ontario, said that the government should not change the law that allows parents to file religious exemptions or choose not to vaccinate their children. World Health Organization, the media aren't paying any attention to that. Speaking of the World Health Organization, what makes the focus on Texas seem even more politicized is the recent issuing of a travel advisory to the United States due to, quote, an ongoing outbreak in the US. The WHO reports that at the time of the advisory, 7 states had reported a total of 378 cases. It's actually a few more now, the majority of which were in unvaccinated children. So nothing in the WHO report about Ontario, Canada, and it didn't mention the measles outbreak, which you probably also never heard about, in the European region, which includes Central Asia. According to a March 2025 report, just last month, there were, I hope you're sitting down, 127,350 measles cases reported in the European region in 2024, twice as many as 2023, and the most reported since 1997. This is one case in 5,850 people. The number in the United States is 1 in 873,015 people. And yet the US we have a travel advisory for the US, nothing for the European region. According to a March 11th, 2025 report from the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, between February 24 and January 2025, there were 32,265 people diagnosed with measles in the European Union, which is smaller than the European region. Yet there's no travel advisory to EU countries. So what's going on with this? Well, here's the deal. First, the medical pharmaceutical cabal is having apoplectic fits over the appointment and confirmation of people like RFK and Jay Bhattacharya and Dr. Oz to positions of power in the US government. These are independent thinkers who aren't on the payroll of Big Pharma and who have expressed publicly that they have some concerns about vaccines. It's just getting harder and harder to escape the fact that there's growing skepticism, and it's getting harder to marginalize people like me who've been concerned about this for the last few decades. Another thing is that almost immediately upon taking office, President Trump cut off funding to the World Health Organization. Now, according to the WHO, this has resulted in a $2.5 billion gap in funding. So my advice to Tedros, the head of the WHO, he has very close ties to the President Xi Jinping, the president of China. Ask China to take care of the budget deficit, particularly since SARS-CoV-2 came from a lab controlled by the PRC, and President Xi and his henchmen covered it up for such a long time. Meanwhile, here in the United States, the insanity continues. According to an article posted on MedPage, pediatric infectious disease experts are recommending an extra dose of the MMR vaccine. I hope you're sitting down for this. For babies 6 to 11 months old who live in or plan to travel to an area in the US where there's been an outbreak. Remember, this 1 in a million is an outbreak. This idea is supported by former CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. Current guidelines recommend that babies get their first MMR shot at 12 months, But with almost 1 in a million people in the US having measles, you can understand why we really need to back that up to 6 months to 11 months, right? In an op-ed, Walensky and her friends explained that infants usually receive some protection in the form of antibodies from their moms during their first 6 months, but it kind of fades, and that leaves a vulnerable gap between 6 months and a year. And gosh, we need to give them vaccines. The gap hasn't been a major concern before, they say, because the United States had eradicated the disease, but now that it's making a comeback, we need to revisit our policies. One of my favorite things is this Mary Caserta, medical doctor and pediatric infectious disease specialist at the University of Rochester. She says that the COVID-19 pandemic taught people that science and medicine changes with time as we gain more data and information. So if we have data showing there's an increased risk of measles, I'm definitely in favor of reviewing our immunization guidelines to see what we can do to best protect our children. Of course, she has no concern about vaccine-injured children. None of that, right? For some added drama, Caserta recalls her own bout of measles when she was 5 or 6 years old. She writes, quote, "To this day, she remembers it well. The things I remember most are the conjunctivitis, the cough, and the fever. My eyes were extremely painful. Thankfully, I recovered fully, but I was very ill." She's also very permanently immune from measles as a result, a fact which she conveniently leaves out. And we have kids who are vaccinated getting measles every year in the United States, and they don't want to talk about that. So the bottom line is this is just all political theater designed to gin up a crisis where there is none. And we can expect more of it as more and more people feel comfortable about speaking out and refusing vaccines, and our new public health officials begin looking into the matter, as I am fairly certain they're going to do. There is a sea change out there, and it's in so many areas. And free speech is a wonderful, wonderful thing that's thankfully being restored in our country. There is a time when I couldn't have said what I'm saying to you now and posted in some of the places where it's being posted now because I was being censored and I was being threatened and that sort of thing. So we're back to free speech in America. And with free speech, we have the opportunity to solve a lot of problems. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and these people are very, very afraid of the light that's being shown on what they have advocated for years. I made the offer a few weeks ago that I had written a detailed report about the measles, referenced, of course, as I always do. And if you would like to get that report, it's free. Send me an email at Pam Popper at WellnessForumHealth.com, WellnessForum.com, I should say, Pam Popper at WellnessForum.com, and I'm more than happy to send it to you. And then, of course, donations are welcome. And if you're interested in our membership program and signing up for the Food Over Medicine weekend coming up and all the wonderful things that we're doing, or starting a tribe or a Food Over Medicine club, send me an email. Let's talk. All right, that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you next week with more news. Thank you so much for watching.